Good morning. Today we delve into one of the most pivotal battles of the Pacific War, the Battle of Tarawa, where a single weapon would challenge centuries of Japanese military doctrine. On the dawn of November 20th, 1943, at exactly 6:23 hours, an astonishing scene erupted on Red Beach 2. Geysers of earth and debris moving in perfect patterns, as if driven by an unstoppable force. How could such a precise and relentless barrage be coordinated? Who was this Marine First Lieutenant commanding a strange, formidable weapon unlike anything the Japanese defenders had ever seen? Could a single rifle really turn the tide of a brutal island assault? And what does this tell us about the clash between two vastly different military worlds, one rooted in spiritual strength and close combat, the other in industrialized firepower? All these facts point to a single question. How did technological innovation, embodied by the Browning automatic rifle, undermine the Japanese martial ideals rooted in honor and spiritual power? In this video, we will trace the rise of American automatic weapons, dissect the Japanese military's deep reliance on traditional doctrine, and reveal how one weapon shattered centuries of martial belief, leading to a devastating defeat that changed the course of Pacific warfare. The most intense part of the story begins right now. So prepare to see how firepower, industry, and innovation redefine the battlefield forever. On the early morning of November 20th in the year 1943, precisely at 6:23 hours, a fierce and unprecedented scene unfolded on Red Beach 2, located on Betio Island within the Tarawa Atoll. The landscape was suddenly transformed by a series of explosive bursts in the sand, which erupted in a meticulously coordinated pattern that the Japanese defenders stationed there had never before encountered in their military experience. These geysers of earth and debris moved in precise, well-spaced intervals, advancing directly toward the hidden positions of the Japanese defenders with a mechanical regularity that seemed almost unnatural. Each impact was timed perfectly, creating a relentless barrage that seemed to march forward with purpose and unerring accuracy. Through the narrow firing slit of a makeshift bunker constructed from palm logs, the Japanese naval infantry observed this strange and relentless phenomenon. Their eyes were fixed on a Marine First Lieutenant named William Dean Hawkins, who was crawling forward with what appeared to be an oversized rifle, an unfamiliar and formidable weapon that contrasted sharply with the typical armaments they expected to face. The Japanese defensive manual, a doctrine that had been drilled into their soldiers, asserted that American troops relied primarily on massed rifle fire and that their individual firearms paled in comparison to the perceived spiritual strength embodied in Japanese bayonet charges. Yet in this moment, Hawkins with his peculiar weapon was about to demonstrate why the Japanese would suffer a devastating loss of 4,500 soldiers on Tarawa within a mere 76 hours. The rifle in Hawkins' hands was a Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR. It weighed approximately 19 pounds when unloaded and could unleash .30-06 Springfield rounds with a remarkable dual-rate firing system. The weapon could operate at a slow rate, around 300 to 450 rounds per minute, or at a rapid rate, between 500 and 600 150 rounds per minute. Its 20-round magazines were capable of being rapidly expended, emptying in less than 3 seconds when firing at the high rate, an astonishing demonstration of firepower. As the Japanese defenders would soon witness, the tactical doctrine of the Imperial Japanese Army was about to be fundamentally challenged and rendered tragically obsolete by this display of technological firepower. What occurred next would become a recurring scene across countless Pacific islands. It was a stark clash between two vastly differing military cultures, one that glorified spiritual strength and close combat, rooted in traditional Bushido values, versus an industrialized democracy that had mechanized the act of killing into a deadly yet efficient process. The Browning automatic rifle, far more than just a weapon, embodied the principles of American mass production applied to infantry warfare. Its rapid-fire capacity and reliability symbolized the industrialized nature of the United States military approach. The Japanese, well trained to accept death rather than retreat, would soon come to realize that mere courage, no matter how intense, could no longer defend against the overwhelming and efficient firepower delivered by these advanced weapons. Less than 20 minutes after Hawkins initiated his assault, his scout sniper platoon had already succeeded in clearing 3 Japanese strongpoints by concentrating their fire with the BAR. The battle for Tarawa had commenced with a powerful demonstration of American firepower that directly contradicted Japan's traditional military teachings, which had been based on doctrines that emphasized spiritual power and close-quarters combat. The Imperial Japanese Army had entered the Pacific War with tactics deeply rooted in their earlier successes against China and Russia. Their military manuals from 1909, still in use during the 1940s, dedicated 17 pages to the importance of spiritual power and bayonet fighting, yet contained only a scant 2 paragraphs addressing the use of automatic weapons. The Japanese military ideology placed immense value on sashin, spiritual strength that could supposedly allow a soldier to overcome material disadvantages through sheer will. The Bushido Code, which influenced their military ethos, taught that a sufficiently motivated soldier could defeat any enemy through his resolve alone, without reliance on technological advantages. This belief was not merely propaganda, it was institutionalized into Japanese military science. The Japanese Army's infantry school at Chiba propagated the idea that a single Japanese soldier possessed the fighting capacity of 3 Chinese soldiers or 2 Russian soldiers, based purely on their supposed spiritual superiority. Despite this emphasis on spiritual fortitude, the Japanese were aware of the existence of automatic weapons and their destructive potential. They possessed their own light machine guns, such as the Type 96 and Type 99 models. During the course of the war, approximately 41,000 Type 96 light machine guns and 53,000 Type 99 guns were produced. However, these weapons, while present in their arsenals, were distributed in a manner that was often insufficient or ineffective against the modern, mechanically driven firepower that American forces brought to the battlefield. The Japanese military's understanding of warfare was deeply rooted in traditional values and the belief that spiritual strength alone could determine victory. Yet in the brutal reality of Tarawa and other Pacific battles, it became painfully clear that technological innovation and industrial efficiency could overpower even the most deeply ingrained. In the evolution of infantry tactics during World War II, a significant shift was taking place, particularly in the United States Army and Marine Corps. This shift revolved around the strategic deployment of automatic weapons, especially those that could be operated by individual soldiers or small units, rather than relying solely on crew-served machine guns. These weapons, often called support weapons, were considered crucial enough to be allocated at a rate of 2 or 3 per company, each treated as specialized tools requiring dedicated crews for optimal use. Their role was not just to supplement the firepower, but to fundamentally alter the way infantry units engaged in combat by providing a continuous, suppressive automatic fire that could be instantly employed by regular squad members. However, this approach to increasing firepower, equipping every squad with multiple automatic rifles, was profoundly at odds with the traditional Japanese military philosophy. Historically, Japanese infantry tactics placed a premium on individual valor, discipline, and close-quarters combat, rather than on the volume or democratization of automatic firepower. To the Japanese command, the concept of every soldier wielding a potent automatic rifle, capable of unleashing sustained fire, was nearly incomprehensible. They believed that the power of automatic weapons should remain within the domain of specialized crew-served weapons, operated by trained crews rather than ordinary infantrymen. This fundamental misunderstanding would have dire consequences as the war progressed, especially in the Pacific theater. On the numerous islands where fierce fighting took place, Japanese soldiers repeatedly encountered American squads that possessed far more automatic firepower than entire Japanese platoons. The American forces had, through innovative doctrine and mass production, equipped their infantry with weapons that dramatically increased their combat effectiveness. The most iconic of these weapons was the Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR. Throughout the war, the United States produced these rifles at an astonishing rate, turning out hundreds of thousands of units, a level of manufacturing that Japanese military planners found almost incomprehensible. The BAR, designed by John Browning in 1917 and refined during the interwar period, symbolized this new era of firepower democratization. Unlike traditional machine guns that required complex setups and teams of specialists, the BAR was lightweight enough to be carried and operated by individual soldiers or small squads. It represented a significant departure from Japanese conventional thinking, embodying the idea that all infantrymen should have access to portable, automatic fire capability. The weapon fired a powerful 30-06 cartridge and could sustain rates of fire up to 650 rounds per minute, with an effective range exceeding 1,000 yards. Impressive specifications for a rifle of its type. What truly made the BAR revolutionary, however, was not merely its technical capabilities, but the doctrines surrounding its employment. By 1943, the American military had integrated the BAR into virtually every Marine rifle squad, with 3 such rifles per squad and at least 1 in each Army squad. This widespread distribution meant that small units could deploy immediate automatic firepower on the battlefield without waiting for machine gun teams to set up heavy weapons. This shift turned every squad into a mini machine gun unit, capable of continuous suppressive fire, greatly increasing their offensive and defensive flexibility. The significance of this technological and doctrinal change was vividly demonstrated during the early campaigns in the Pacific. On August 7th, in the Solomon Islands, specifically at Guadalcanal, the first major American offensive in the Pacific theater unfolded, providing the Japanese with their initial, close-up experience of American firepower. The subsequent engagement at the Alu River on August 21st of the same year exemplified the emerging pattern of Pacific combat, a brutal contest where well-equipped American squads, armed with multiple BARs, faced Japanese forces unprepared for such sustained automatic fire. One notable figure in this context was Marine Sergeant John Basilone, who would later be awarded the Medal of Honor for his extraordinary bravery on Guadalcanal. During his service, Basilone operated both machine guns and the BAR, demonstrating the versatility and importance of these weapons in combat. In October of 1942, during a fierce battle, Basilone and his men repelled approximately 3,000 Japanese attackers with relentless machine gun fire, showcasing the destructive capability of American automatic weapons when employed effectively against Japanese human wave tactics. These tactics, which relied on massed assaults, were increasingly rendered ineffective by the American firepower advantage. While the technical specifications of weapons like the BAR, firing the formidable 30-06 round at variable rates, effectively engaging targets beyond 1,000 yards, told only part of the story, it was their employment doctrine that truly marked a revolution in infantry combat. The widespread distribution of automatic rifles allowed small units to act with a new level of independence and aggression, disrupting Japanese tactics and forcing a reevaluation of their strategies on the battlefield. By the year 1943, every Marine rifle squad was equipped with 3 bars, and every Army squad boasted at least 1. This meant that American small units, often only a dozen or so soldiers, possessed organic automatic firepower that could be employed instantly and effectively. Such capability was pivotal in shaping amidst the chaos of intense combat. The overlapping fields of automatic weapon fire created a deadly tapestry of deadly arcs and converging streams of bullets, with machine guns strategically placed throughout the Marine lines to maximize their battlefield effect. These weapons, especially the Browning automatic rifles, or BARS, played a pivotal role in shaping the outcome of the battles. And one Marine, Private First Class Albert Schmid, became particularly renowned for his extraordinary actions during that fateful night. However, it is important to recognize that the ultimate victory was not solely due to individual heroism, but was the result of the relentless and coordinated firepower of all automatic weapons present, including the 12 bearers stationed within each rifle company, which faced the Japanese assault head-on. Each of these bar gunners had been meticulously trained to execute rapid-fire bursts, specifically 6-round, approximately 1-second-long bursts, then to shift their positions swiftly to maintain continuous pressure and prevent the Japanese from closing in. As the Japanese soldiers advanced toward the glaring muzzle flashes of these machine guns, they encountered nothing but empty space when they finally reached the positions, because the Marine firepower had repelled their assault with devastating efficiency. By the time the dust settled, Only about 128 of Ichiki's original force of 917 Japanese soldiers remained alive, a staggering loss that vividly illustrated the destructive power of American automatic weaponry. To put this into perspective, a single Japanese rifle squad consisting of 13 men could theoretically have fired around 65 aimed rounds per minute using their bolt-action Arisaka rifles, a modest but steady rate of fire. In stark contrast, a Marine squad equipped with 3 bars could unleash approximately 150 rounds in just the first 4 seconds of engagement, before the Japanese soldiers could even work their bolts for a second shot, highlighting the overwhelming firepower advantage that American forces possessed. This disparity in firepower prompted the Japanese to respond by seeking cover underground, retreating into elaborate cave systems that by late 1943 had become the cornerstone of their island defense strategy. These weren't simple, shallow holes, but rather intricate underground fortresses comprising multiple chambers connected by tunnels, with interlocking fields of fire that created virtually impenetrable strongholds. Japanese military doctrine held that these fortified positions were virtually invulnerable to conventional attack. Only massive artillery barrages or direct assaults could hope to neutralize them. However, the arrival and widespread deployment of the BAR fundamentally altered this calculus, providing Marines with a new and effective method for attacking these subterranean defenses. On the 22nd of November in 1943, during the Battle of Tarawa, Marines encountered the first truly sophisticated Japanese cave defenses. Over time, a standard method of attack was developed. Approach the caves from an oblique angle to minimize exposure, then position a BAR gunner approximately 25 yards from the entrance and unleash a continuous stream of fire, firing a full magazine in a figure-8 pattern directly into the opening. This approach was designed to saturate the entrance with bullets, creating a devastating and persistent barrage. The underlying physics of this tactic were straightforward but highly effective. The 30-06 rounds fired by the BR maintained lethal velocity even as they ricocheted within the confined spaces, bouncing off walls, ceilings, and floors. A single burst fired into a cave entrance could fill the chamber with unpredictable, bouncing projectiles, effectively turning the interior into a lethal trap. Marines soon discovered that firing a 20-round magazine into a cave could produce what they called a hornet's nest effect. The bullets ricocheted and deflected chaotically in unpredictable patterns within the confined space, making survival inside impossible for the Japanese defenders. Trained to hold these positions to the death, the Japanese soldiers learned quickly that death often arrived before they even had the chance to see their attacker, as the relentless volume and randomness of American automatic fire kept them pinned down and vulnerable. By June 15th, in the year 1944, during the Battle of Saipan in the Mariana Islands, the Japanese had invested months in meticulous preparations, learning from previous encounters such as Tarawa and Guadalin. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Sato commanded approximately 31,000 defenders, who had fortified their positions to appear nearly impregnable. These defenses had been designed with the lessons of earlier battles in mind, and the Japanese soldiers had studied American tactics rigorously, preparing for every conceivable scenario. Yet they had not anticipated the sheer volume of automatic firepower the Americans would bring to bear. By the time the Marines launched their assault on Saipan, their tactical doctrine had undergone significant evolution, focusing heavily on maximizing the effectiveness of the bar. Each rifle company had been reorganized around bar teams, with the official ratio now suggesting 1 bar for every 4 Marines, a substantial increase from previous standard allocations. Unofficially, Marines sought to acquire additional BARs whenever possible, with some squads operating with 5 or even 6 guns, further amplifying their firepower and tactical flexibility. This adaptation allowed them to punch through Japanese defenses with the introduction of the BAR, or Browning automatic rifle, marked a significant turning point in infantry tactics during World War II, transforming the traditional role of infantry units into formidable mobile automatic weapons platforms capable of delivering sustained suppressive fire across the battlefield. Its deployment was especially pivotal during the intense fighting on Saipan, where the Battle of Purple Heart Ridge vividly demonstrated the weapon's devastating effectiveness. The Japanese defenders, having fortified their positions within interconnected coral limestone caves, had constructed a complex network of trenches and bunkers that were designed to be virtually impossible to flank or bypass. These subterranean fortifications provided a seemingly impregnable stronghold, challenging American forces to find new ways to break their defenses. Amid this brutal confrontation, Marine Private First Class Harold Agarm distinguished himself not primarily as a gunner, but as a hero whose actions would eventually earn him an honorary Medal of Honor. Under relentless enemy fire, Agarm bravely evacuated a total of 45 wounded Marines, risking his life to save others in the chaos of combat. His courageous effort exemplified the kind of heroism that allowed BAR teams to hold their positions firmly and continue delivering relentless, suppressive fire, pinning down the enemy and preventing their counterattacks. The battle was a testament not only to the weapon's firepower, but also to the extraordinary bravery of individual Marines. The figures emerging from Saipan revealed the sheer scale of American firepower. Over the course of just 3 weeks, the 2nd Marine Division alone fired approximately 8,700,000 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition, much of it unleashed through the BARs and supporting machine guns. This staggering volume of firepower showcased the advantage the Allies had gained through industrial production, allowing them to supply their troops with vast quantities of ammunition at a rate far exceeding Japan's capacity to produce soldiers. The technological and logistical superiority gave the Americans a decisive edge, making it clear that in this conflict, firepower could often determine the outcome more decisively than manpower alone. The impact of the BAR extended beyond raw physical destruction. It also had a profound psychological effect on the enemy. The distinctive sound of the bar's rapid, rhythmic thudding, differing markedly from the more steady crack of conventional machine guns, became a harbinger of imminent danger. To Japanese soldiers, the sound signified that American automatic firepower was close, mobile, and actively hunting them down. This auditory cue created a psychological atmosphere of fear and helplessness, as the mere noise of multiple BARS opening up simultaneously sounded like a rolling thunderstorm, heralding the presence of overwhelming American firepower and the imminent destruction of their positions. Moreover, the psychological impact of the BOAR was magnified by the strict fire discipline ingrained in Marine training. American Marines were taught to fire in short, controlled bursts designed to maximize accuracy and conserve ammunition. This approach contrasted sharply with the Japanese expectation of wild, wasteful American volleys, which were often seen as careless or overly aggressive. Instead, the Marines' discipline, precise firing, resulted in each burst causing actual casualties, not merely suppression. This methodical approach to automatic fire made every shot count, leading to more effective elimination of enemy soldiers. By the middle of 1944, intelligence gleaned from captured Japanese documents revealed that the Japanese military hierarchy understood the significance of the American automatic riflemen. Their soldiers were instructed to recognize and prioritize killing these gun crews, acknowledging that they formed the backbone of American small unit tactics. The bar gunners had become the central figures in the battlefield, controlling the tempo of engagements and providing the critical suppressive fire that kept advancing Marines safe and effective. However, identifying BAR gunners in combat proved to be a nearly impossible task. The weapons were highly mobile, often carried by Marines who moved constantly to avoid retaliation, and every Marine squad typically operated multiple automatic rifles. Their swift movements and the high density of fire teams made it difficult for the Japanese to single out individual gunners amidst the chaos. On February 19, 1945, during the invasion of Iwima, the Japanese faced American firepower at its most intense after 3 years of relentless combat. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding approximately 21,000 Japanese defenders, had studied every previous battle and devised an intricate layered defense involving interconnected tunnels extending over 11 miles underground, a sophisticated evolution of Japanese cave warfare designed to withstand the relentless American onslaught. Yet the Marine Corps had also adapted and evolved its tactics in response to the Japanese defenses. Through bitter experience, Marines developed specialized strategies centered around the use of the BAR. The concept of bar up front became standard doctrine, involving automatic riflemen leading advances, suppressing enemy positions, and allowing riflemen to maneuver and flank from safer positions. The role of the automatic rifle, which had previously been primarily defensive during World War I, shifted dramatically to an offensive tool of maneuver in the Pacific theater. The weapon's mobility and suppressive power became crucial for gaining ground and breaking through entrenched Japanese defenses. One of the notable figures embodying this evolution was Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, a hero of Guadal. He was leading the charge of his machine gun sections forward when he was ultimately struck down by a mortar blast. An ironic and tragic end for a soldier who had survived some of the fiercest fighting of the Pacific War. His death came during the very early hours of a pivotal battle, overshadowing the many victories he had earned in the brutal conflicts that had raged across the Pacific. At Iwima, only a fraction of the original Japanese garrison, just over 1,083 soldiers, were taken prisoner, out of a total force that once numbered around 21,000 troops. The vast majority of the defenders had perished on the battlefield, many of them sealed within caves by heavy artillery fire, fighting to the last breath in a desperate bid for survival. During the course of the 36 days of fighting, the United States Marine Corps expended an estimated 12 million rounds of small arms ammunition. To put this into perspective, the 28th Marine Regiment, which participated in the assault on Mount Suribachi, alone used approximately 90,000 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition over a span of 5 days. The date was April 1st, 1945, and the site was Okinawa, one of the final and most intense battles of the Pacific theater. This decisive engagement would serve as a clear demonstration of the unmatched dominance of American automatic weapons. The Japanese 32nd Army, defending the island with roughly 130,000 soldiers, including Okinawan conscripts, had meticulously prepared its defenses, integrating every lesson learned and every adaptive tactic developed throughout the conflict. Despite this, they faced not only Marines equipped with the Browning automatic rifle, but also an American military machine that had perfected the mass production and widespread deployment of automatic firepower. By this stage of the war, the United States had produced in excess of 300,000 Browning automatic rifles, a staggering industrial achievement. In many Army units, official organization had either been abandoned or significantly loosened. Some divisions operated with as little as 1 BAR for every 2 or 3 soldiers, emphasizing the importance of firepower over strict adherence to traditional formations. The 96th Infantry Division reported carrying far more Browning automatic rifles than their authorized allotment, as soldiers understood that survival in combat depended heavily on the sheer volume of automatic fire they could bring to bear, firepower that became synonymous with their ability to hold the line. Colonel Hirami Yahara, the senior staff officer of the Japanese 32nd Army and one of the few high-ranking officers to survive the battle, later recounted in post-war writings the overwhelming material superiority of the American forces. Though his accounts do not specifically reference the Browning automatic rifle, at least not in readily available translations, he described how the main Japanese defensive line at Shuri did not fall to massive frontal assaults. Instead, it collapsed gradually under the relentless and methodical application of American automatic weapons fire. Cave after cave, position after position, was systematically neutralized through the precise and sustained firepower of American machine guns. The Japanese had anticipated a fight of spiritual resolve, but instead faced a form of warfare driven by industrial might and technological superiority. The story of the Browning automatic rifle was inextricably linked to the broader narrative of American industrial capacity. While Japanese soldiers fought and died inside caves, American factories carried out astonishing feats of production that would have seemed impossible to their counterparts in Japan. The IBM factory located in Poughkeepsie, New York, which had previously manufactured typewriters and calculating machines, shifted its focus to BAR production as early as 1941. By 1944, IBM had manufactured an astonishing 20,000 Browning automatic rifles, each one produced and tested to tighter tolerances than the hand-fitted weapons assembled by the Japanese military. The New England Small Arms Corporation was responsible for producing the majority of wartime BARS, approximately 168,380 units, serving as a prime example of American industrial mobilization at its peak. Meanwhile, the Marlin Rockwell Corporation, which had limited prior experience in weapons manufacturing before 1941, invested heavily in new facilities specifically dedicated to BAR production, further exemplifying America's capacity to scale up war efforts rapidly. Even international efforts were considered during this period. Carl Gustav Stadas, the Swedish arms manufacturer, obtained a license to produce Browning automatic rifles and reportedly offered to sell them to Japan through neutral channels in 1943. The Japanese military attaché in Stockholm investigated this possibility. However, Japan lacked the necessary foreign currency reserves and the shipping capacity required to facilitate such an import, underscoring the logistical and economic challenges that hampered their efforts to match American industrial output. In the end, it was not just the courage and resilience of Japanese soldiers that determined the outcome, but the overwhelming industrial might of the United States, an industrial capacity that had transformed the production of automatic weapons from a logistical challenge into an unstoppable force on the battlefield. During World War II, the United States' industrial capacity for producing small arms and ammunition was nothing short of extraordinary, especially when contrasted with the limited output of Japan's wartime industries. For instance, American manufacturing figures indicated that approximately 350,000 bars, or Browning automatic rifles, were produced in total. When compared to Japan's production, roughly 41,000 units of the Type 96 and 53,000 of the Type 99 light machine guns, the stark disparity in industrial capability became immediately apparent. America's wartime industry was capable of manufacturing nearly 4 times the combined output of all Japanese light machine guns, highlighting the vast technological and logistical advantages held by the United States. The effectiveness of the American BAR was intimately tied to the supply of ammunition, an aspect of industrial achievement that was often difficult for the Japanese to comprehend or replicate. Each soldier armed with a BAR carried between 12 and 15 magazines, supplying roughly 240 to 300 rounds for each gunner. Beyond the individual, ammunition was distributed throughout squads, allowing a Marine rifle squad to carry an additional 2,000 rounds of small arms ammunition, aside from the rifle rounds each soldier carried. This distribution system meant that units could sustain prolonged engagements without the immediate need for resupply. Throughout the war, American ammunition plants produced billions of rounds, ensuring an almost limitless supply of small arms ammunition for the troops on the front lines. While it is challenging to verify the specific claim that the United States produced exactly 21 billion, 36 million rounds of small arms ammunition, historical estimates suggest that the total production was approximately 47 billion rounds of all types during the entire conflict. This staggering volume of ammunition guaranteed that American forces would rarely, if ever, face shortages, even under the most intense combat conditions. To put this into perspective, during the Battle of Okinawa alone, American forces fired an estimated 60 million rounds of small arms ammunition over the course of 82 days. The 24th Marine Corps Regiment alone documented firing around 25 million rounds, encompassing both rifle and machine gun ammunition. In stark contrast, Japanese defenders were often limited to a mere 100 rounds per soldier for the duration of an entire battle. The disparity in ammunition availability was so pronounced that American troops could expend their ammunition at a rate that would seem reckless or wasteful to Japanese forces, who were constrained by supply shortages and less industrialized war production. Behind these stark figures were countless human beings, soldiers on both sides, whose fates were shaped by the relentless and impersonal machinery of industrial warfare. The total number of Japanese military deaths during the war is estimated at approximately 2,300,000, according to official Japanese government statistics compiled after the conflict. However, further academic research by Japanese historians suggests that around 60% of these casualties, roughly 1,400,000, died not from direct combat, but from starvation, disease, and other war-related hardships. The remaining casualties resulted from combat-related causes, including artillery, aerial bombardment, naval gunfire, and small arms fire. While it is impossible to determine precisely how many Japanese soldiers fell specifically due to the use of the American Browning automatic rifle, It is undeniable that this weapon significantly contributed to the overwhelming firepower that gave American forces a decisive advantage. In the vast expanse of the Pacific theater, American units often inflicted casualties at ratios exceeding 10 to 1, largely owing to their superior firepower, which was made possible through industrial capacity and logistical support rather than sheer numerical superiority. By mid-1944, U.S. Marine Corps had developed specialized procedures for clearing caves, an essential aspect of Pacific Island warfare, maximizing the effectiveness of their automatic weapons. These tactics, derived from extensive experience gained at battles such as Tarawa and Saipan, outlined systematic approaches to quickly and safely neutralize Japanese defenses. The standard operating procedure involved positioning the bar gunner at an oblique angle to the cave entrance, maintaining a standoff distance of approximately 25 yards, and firing a full magazine in a controlled pattern to suppress defenders. Marking the cleared caves with white phosphorus grenades allowed infantry to advance without fear of enemy reoccupation, while continuous suppression prevented defenders from regrouping or launching counterattacks. Repeated thousands of times across the Pacific, this method transformed cave clearance from a perilous and chaotic close-quarter struggle into a mechanically efficient process, one that relied heavily on the relentless volume of American automatic firepower. The Japanese, who had meticulously designed their cave defenses to create deadly kill zones for attacking troops, often found themselves outmatched not only by the firepower, but also by the systematic approach employed by American forces. Their defenses, intended as formidable obstacles, instead became target zones that were systematically and efficiently neutralized through well-practiced tactics and overwhelming firepower. This combination of industrial-scale weapon production, logistical superiority, and tactical innovation was instrumental in shaping the outcome of Pacific battles, where the technological and industrial disparity clearly favored the American military efforts. The intense combat situations often saw troops trapped within the deadly confines of makeshift death chambers, where the relentless ricocheting of bullets off walls and obstacles created a cacophony of chaos and peril. The stark contrast between American and Japanese automatic weapons during this period was not merely a matter of numerical superiority, it was a profound difference in quality, craftsmanship, and design philosophy. The American Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR, embodied decades of meticulous industrial refinement, extensive experience in mass production, and unparalleled mechanical precision. These attributes allowed it to function reliably under the brutal conditions of warfare, a feat that Japanese weapons struggled to match. Japan's closest equivalents, the Type 96 and Type 99 light machine guns, were considerably heavier, requiring 2 soldiers to operate effectively, and weighed approximately 19.2 kilograms and 21.6 kilograms respectively, especially when equipped with a bipod. Furthermore, these weapons were plagued by inconsistent manufacturing standards, which compromised their reliability and performance. Japanese manufacturing at the time was heavily rooted in small-scale craft production, often carried out in workshops where artisans focused on individual parts with great care, but lacked the capacity to meet the strict tolerances necessary for dependable automatic weapon operation. As a result, springs would frequently fail, extractors would break, and feeding mechanisms would jam at critical moments. The underlying metallurgy of these weapons told a clear story. They used inferior steel, which required complex heat treatment processes performed by highly skilled craftsmen. Such meticulous treatment was difficult to scale for mass production, leading to inconsistent quality and reliability. In contrast, American weapon manufacturing employed advanced techniques, including the use of chrome molybdenum steel in barrels, which allowed the BAR to sustain prolonged firing without warping or deterioration. This material choice was revolutionary, enabling continuous bursts of fire for extended periods. Conversely, the Japanese weapons relied on inferior steel alloys that could not withstand the heat and stress of sustained automatic fire without deforming or malfunctioning. Their steel components demanded precise heat treatment, an intricate process that was difficult to reproduce consistently on a large scale, further hampering mass production efforts. The result was that American manufacturing, with its emphasis on standardization and industrial efficiency, produced superior weaponry more rapidly than Japan's traditional craft-based methods, which often resulted in inferior equipment delivered too late or with flaws. The introduction of the BAR fundamentally transformed the art of marksmanship from a focus on individual skill to a systematic application of firepower. American soldiers trained to shoot with precision, aiming carefully at enemies. However, they soon learned that their Japanese counterparts trained in precise, aimed rifle fire found their tactics increasingly ineffective against American automatic riflemen. The Americans employed a technique called walking fire, where they would aim in a general direction and then move the weapon steadily across a target area, observing the impact of their fire and adjusting accordingly. This method allowed American troops to unleash a continuous stream of bullets over a broad area, effectively suppressing and displacing Japanese soldiers hiding behind cover. This approach, firing in a controlled, sweeping manner, was impossible with bolt-action rifles, which required careful aiming in single shots. The American practice of walking fire made concealment and camouflage, which were central to Japanese infantry tactics, less effective. A single bar gunner could cover an entire hillside with a single magazine, forcing enemy soldiers to either reveal themselves or risk being mowed down in place. The idea of denying the enemy territory through overwhelming area fire, rather than through pinpoint accuracy, marked a fundamental shift in infantry combat. This shift posed a significant challenge to Japanese tactical doctrines, which had yet to develop effective countermeasures against this new paradigm of firepower. The formidable effectiveness of the BAR depended heavily on the United States' logistical superiority. The gun's utility was inextricably linked to a vast and sophisticated supply chain that stretched back to American factories. From there, munitions were transported via freight trains, cargo ships, and air transports to forward supply depots near the front lines. Every bar in combat was supported by a complex infrastructure that was almost incomprehensible to Japanese military planners who lacked the capacity for such large-scale logistical operations. For example, a single Marine regiment in combat could consume roughly 40,000 rounds of small arms ammunition each week. Supplying this immense volume required dedicated ships, shore parties, ammunition carriers, and strategically placed forward dumps, all working seamlessly together. The Japanese, expecting the Americans to deplete their supplies after initial assaults, watched with a mix of frustration and disbelief as the opposite occurred. American firepower actually intensified as the campaign progressed, made possible only through their unparalleled logistical capabilities. At Alethi Atoll, a meticulously constructed naval and logistical base established in the year of 1944, American logistics personnel managed enormous quantities of ammunition daily, ensuring that the fighting forces never lacked the necessary resources. The continuous flow of ammunition from West Coast manufacturing plants to Pacific supply bases was supported by a network of ports, ships, handling equipment, and storage facilities, an industrial effort that far exceeded Japan's entire military budget and logistical capabilities. Superiority in warfare was embodied in fundamentally contrasting visions of combat and military culture, each shaped by distinct historical and societal values. Japanese military tradition, deeply rooted in the samurai ethos, placed a high premium on individual heroism, personal honor, and spiritual strength. Soldiers were trained to see their weapons not merely as tools, but as sacred symbols, extensions of their loyalty to the emperor, deserving reverence and religious devotion. In stark contrast, the American military culture, forged within the framework of a burgeoning industrial democracy, emphasized the importance of firepower, operational efficiency, and technological advantage. It regarded weapons as reliable, replaceable components of a vast logistical system optimized through mass production and standardized training. This cultural divide extended beyond mere attitude towards weapons to the very way they were treated and maintained. Japanese soldiers regarded their rifles with a reverence that bordered on the religious. Each weapon was meticulously cared for as a revered object reflecting their spiritual and national loyalty. In stark opposition, American Marines and soldiers saw their firearms, particularly their Browning automatic rifles, as practical instruments designed for maximum effectiveness. When a weapon like the BRS malfunctioned, American troops simply drew a replacement from their supply lines, viewing equipment as expendable and easily interchangeable. Conversely, Japanese soldiers often faced life-threatening situations when their weapons jammed or broke, as they would frequently attempt to repair them under fire, risking their lives in the process. American military training vividly reflected this industrial, efficiency-driven mindset. At prominent training centers such as Camp Pendleton and Fort Benning, Marines and soldiers learned to operate their weapons through rigorous, repetitive drills that emphasized standard procedures and mechanized, almost factory-like training methods. The goal was to develop instinctive and rapid responses, skills that could be performed seamlessly under combat pressure. Each Marine was drilled to fire more ammunition during training than the total amount Japanese soldiers might fire during their entire service. The standard marksmanship course for a Marine required firing at least 2,000 rounds across various drills, emphasizing rapid magazine changes, clearing jams in combat conditions, and maintaining accurate fire while on the move. This intensive training was only feasible because of the United States' vast industrial capacity, its ability to produce millions of rounds of ammunition, sophisticated firearms, and extensive training infrastructure. It was a stark contrast to Japan's chronic shortages of ammunition, even during combat. Japanese soldiers often entered battle having fired fewer than 100 rounds in training, which severely limited their ability to develop rapid, instinctive shooting skills. The difference in training levels became painfully evident during the last major battles of the Pacific War, such as Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where the overwhelming dominance of American automatic weapons was on full display. The Pacific battles demonstrated a brutal reality. The Japanese defenders, despite formidable terrain advantages and careful preparation, were essentially fighting against an industrially produced onslaught of firepower, an onslaught delivered by millions of rounds, primarily from automatic weapons. On Iwo Jima, Marines expended an estimated 12 million rounds over 36 days of combat. On Okinawa, this figure soared to around 60 million rounds in 82 days, with the VTI Fight Thief Corps alone documenting the use of 25 million rounds. The vast majority of this destructive firepower was delivered through automatic weapons, which continually raked Japanese positions, inflicting devastating casualties and destruction. The Japanese defenders, already weakened by shortages of food, water, and medical supplies, faced an impossible dilemma. They endured relentless automatic weapons fire, rendered immobile and unable to mount effective counterattacks, ultimately awaiting their inevitable deaths. The final battles underscored the stark truth of modern industrial warfare. Each Japanese soldier faced a barrage of hundreds of bullets, a volume of fire that once required the efforts of an entire rifle company in traditional warfare, now delivered efficiently and relentlessly through mechanized logistics and automatic weaponry. While the atomic bombs would eventually bring an end to the Pacific conflict, overshadowing the conventional firepower it had taken to bring Japan to its knees, it was the conventional superiority of weapons like the Browning automatic rifle and other automatic weapons that had already laid the groundwork for defeat. The destructive power of these weapons, combined with the industrial capacity to supply and train troops in their use, made victory inevitable for the Allies. The revolutionary impact of modern, automated, and mass-produced firepower had fundamentally transformed the nature of warfare long before the atomic age, demonstrating that in the realm of modern battle, raw industrial power and mechanized weaponry had become the decisive factors. During the course of the Pacific Campaign, approximately 200,000 Japanese soldiers lost their lives, yet these casualties were overshadowed by the devastating effectiveness of American conventional weaponry. Even before the atomic bombs were dropped, the relentless use of automatic rifles and other standard military equipment had already inflicted far more damage and destruction across the vast theater of operations. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Admiral Suimu Toyota, who served as the Chief of Staff for the Imperial Navy, acknowledged during the final strategic conferences that Japan's prospects of victory were bleak. He understood that America's overwhelming conventional military superiority, its vast industrial capacity, its ability to produce weapons and ammunition on an unprecedented scale, was the critical factor ensuring Japan's inevitable defeat. While it was true that the atomic bombs hastened Japan's surrender, They did not fundamentally alter the underlying military balance of power. Japan simply could not match the immense industrial output of the United States, which continually supplied its forces with a relentless stream of weapons, vehicles, and munitions. After the war, Japanese military officers who had the opportunity to study American industrial practices in person gained a clearer understanding of the true extent of American manufacturing prowess. Official records from that period reveal that during the war, the United States produced roughly 350,000 steel bars, an astonishing figure that was nearly 4 times Japan's entire output of all types of light machine guns combined. Each of these steel bars, an essential component in weapon manufacturing, cost approximately $75 to produce in 1944, reflecting the significant investment and industrial effort behind American military supplies. In comparison, Japanese Type 96 machine guns, which were standard issue during the war, proved to be far more expensive in terms of materials and labor. Despite their higher production costs, these guns offered inferior performance on the battlefield. Visiting American factories in the 1950s, Japanese industrial delegations observed assembly lines, standardized parts, and rigorous quality control procedures, elements that had made American weapons vastly more effective and capable of large-scale production. These insights illuminated the reasons behind Japan's military struggles. While Japan attempted to manufacture inferior weaponry by hand, the United States employed mass production techniques that allowed for the rapid and consistent creation of superior equipment. Military historians now concur that the American Browning automatic rifle, along with other automatic weapons, symbolized the futility of Japanese resistance tactics rooted solely in individual bravery. This technological disparity underscored a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Industrial capacity decisively outweighs the warrior spirit. The ability to produce vast quantities of advanced weaponry and ammunition directly correlates with military effectiveness. As Dr. Edward Dreer, a renowned historian specializing in the Pacific War, observed, American automatic weapons fundamentally transformed infantry combat across the Pacific theater. They rendered traditional Japanese tactics obsolete because the enemy was equipped with an unending supply of automatic rifles, machine guns, and ammunition, enabling them to replace losses instantly and maintain relentless pressure. The statistical evidence vividly supports this assessment. Throughout the entire Pacific conflict, Japanese forces managed to kill approximately 111,000 Americans, a figure that accounts for all causes, while suffering the loss of around 2,300,000 of their own soldiers. This staggering ratio of more than 20-to-1 vividly illustrates the overwhelming advantage American automatic weapons bestowed. Although numerous factors contributed to this severe imbalance, the superiority of American firepower played a decisive role in shaping the outcome of the conflict. The influence of the Browning automatic rifle extended well beyond mere battlefield statistics. It had the power to reshape Japanese society itself. The weapon that contributed significantly to dismantling Japanese militarism also served as a symbol of the triumph of industrial democracy. In the aftermath of the war, Japan identified with the very principles embodied by the BAR: industrial efficiency, technological innovation, and mass production. Japanese companies founded in the post-war era, such as Honda, Toyota, and Sony, drew inspiration from the lessons acquired by observing American manufacturing might. These companies understood that true national strength derived not from military conquest alone, but from a nation's capacity to innovate and produce at scale. Japan's remarkable economic recovery and subsequent economic miracle were in part built upon the lessons learned from the American industrial model. The country's post-war prosperity was fueled by a commitment to technological advancement, efficiency, and mass manufacturing, values that had been exemplified by the American war effort. The influence of American industrial practices was deeply ingrained in Japan's transformation from a war-torn nation into a global economic power, illustrating how the might of industry, rather than sheer military force, could shape the destiny of nations. During the tumultuous era of industrial warfare, the transformation of military equipment and strategic perspectives played a pivotal role in shaping the outcome of conflicts and the subsequent political landscape. When Japan established its self-defense forces in the aftermath of World War II during the early 1950s, it did so with substantial support from the United States. This aid was not limited to financial assistance or strategic advice. It extended deeply into the realm of weaponry. Among the most significant of these military supplies were American firearms, notably including the iconic Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR. Throughout this period, approximately 10,000 of these rifles were supplied to Japanese forces through carefully orchestrated military assistance programs. This infusion of American weaponry meant that Japanese soldiers, who had once fought fiercely against American troops using their own arms, now trained rigorously with the very equipment that had previously been their adversaries on the battlefield. This ironic turn of events marked a profound symbolic shift. The very weapons that had once been instrumental in Japan's defeat became tools in its military rearmament, aligning the nation more closely with its new American allies. It was a stark yet remarkable illustration of the transition from a militaristic empire intent on conquest to an alliance rooted in the principles of industrial democracy and collective security. Over the subsequent decades, this complex history of armed conflict gradually gave way to reconciliation. Veterans from both nations, former enemies, began to meet at various Pacific battlefield sites, engaging in ceremonies aimed at healing old wounds and fostering mutual understanding. These gatherings often featured heartfelt discussions, where American veterans, many of whom had used the BAR extensively, and Japanese soldiers, survivors of intense combat, candidly shared their personal experiences. During these meetings, a remarkable consensus emerged. Both sides recognized that they had been swept up in forces far beyond their individual control, forces driven by the machinery of industrialized war. American Marines armed with the Browning automatic rifle had, in their own way, been tools of a burgeoning industrial democracy that prioritized mass production and firepower. Conversely, Japanese soldiers had been caught within the rigid hierarchy of military feudalism, fighting under a system that emphasized obedience and tradition. The collision of these contrasting systems, industrial democracy on one side and military feudalism on the other, had resulted in staggering tragedy, but also in profound transformation. In the year 1995, on the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Tarawa, veterans from both nations gathered once more. They laid wreaths at memorials, symbolizing a shared recognition that the weapons which had caused such destruction had also contributed to ending the war, and ultimately to the rebirth of their nations. The BAR, often seen solely as an instrument of destruction, was also acknowledged as a catalyst for liberation from militaristic ideologies, contributing to Japan's post-war pacification and reconstruction. When considering the broader impact of the BAR on Pacific warfare, the scale of industrialized conflict becomes unmistakably clear. Looking at production figures, the number of BARs manufactured reached approximately 350,000 units. In comparison, Japan's Type 96 light machine guns were produced in roughly 41,000 units, and its Type 99 light machine guns in about 53,000 units. The American advantage in firepower was therefore staggering, roughly a ratio of 3.7 to 1. In terms of combat statistics, the scale of weapon usage was equally astonishing. During the Battle of Tarawa, around 3 million rounds of ammunition were fired over a span of 76 hours. The Battle of Saipan saw an astonishing 15 million rounds expended in just 3 weeks. At Tarawa, over a period of 36 days, Japanese and American forces together fired 12 million rounds. The Battle of Okinawa alone involved approximately 60 million rounds over 82 days. The human toll of these conflicts reflected the destructive power wielded by these industrial-scale weapons. Overall casualties in the Pacific theater were staggering. It is estimated that Japanese military deaths reached approximately 2,300,000, with a total of around 1,400,000, roughly 60%, succumbing to starvation and disease. When all causes of death within the Japanese forces are included, the total approaches nearly 3 million. Combat-related deaths from all causes numbered approximately 900,000. These figures narrate a story of stark asymmetry in industrial capacity, a disparity that no amount of individual bravery could overcome. The United States, armed with its vast industrial base, could afford to lose 10 BARs for every single Japanese automatic weapon and still maintain superiority on the battlefield. The Americans could fire hundreds of rounds for every Japanese bullet, and despite their numerical advantage, this overwhelming firepower changed the very nature of warfare. Such supremacy in firepower led to fundamental shifts in military doctrine, changes that transcended the Pacific War itself. The effectiveness of portable, automatic weapons distributed at the squad level demonstrated that concentrated machine gun positions were no longer the most efficient strategy. Instead, it became clear that widespread rapid fire at the squad level could, through sheer volume of suppressive fire, in the wake of the numerous defeats suffered by Japan during the early and mid-20th century, it became painfully clear that traditional notions of individual bravery and warrior spirit alone could no longer guarantee victory on the battlefield. Recognizing this profound shift in the nature of warfare, the Japanese military undertook a comprehensive overhaul of its strategies and tactics, fundamentally reorienting itself around the devastating power of automatic weapons. This transformation was not superficial, but deeply ingrained in the very fabric of Japan's military doctrine, so much so that even when the nation's self-defense forces were established in the post-war period, they adopted automatic firearms as the foundational element of infantry combat. The change was thorough and absolute, reflecting a profound acknowledgement that warfare had evolved beyond individual marksmanship and personal valor. The evolution of combat from personal skill to industrial-scale firepower marked a dramatic shift in the entire paradigm of warfare. No longer was success dependent solely on the prowess of an individual soldier. Instead, victory was increasingly defined by the capacity of a nation to produce weapons en masse, leveraging industrial productivity to secure battlefield dominance. This transition signified a move away from the traditional warrior ethos rooted in spiritual strength and personal courage towards a mechanized industrial approach that prioritized manufacturing capability and technological superiority. It was a brutal lesson written into history, especially in the Pacific theater of World War II, where Japanese soldiers learned that sheer bravery alone was insufficient against the relentless, organized industrial might of their adversaries, primarily the United States. One of the most prominent figures to emerge from this period was General Tomoyuki Yamashita, a commanding officer whose career spanned both spectacular victories and devastating defeats. His military journey took him from the conquest of Singapore, where Japanese forces achieved remarkable success, to the catastrophic destruction of their forces in the Philippines. In the aftermath of Japan's surrender and his subsequent execution for war crimes in 1946, Yamashita reflected deeply on the reasons behind Japan's downfall. He came to realize that the Japanese military had fundamentally misunderstood the essence of modern warfare. This insight was not isolated. It was shared by other surviving Japanese commanders who, upon reflection, acknowledged that the core lesson lay in understanding that military power was no longer rooted solely in individual valor or traditional weaponry, but in the system of industrialized production. This realization underscored that the so-called bar, a symbol of automatic firepower, represented more than just a superior firearm. It symbolized a comprehensive system, a testament to the capabilities of industrial democracy to mass-produce sophisticated weaponry while maintaining high standards of quality and fostering continuous innovation. Japan's warrior tradition, long celebrated in its cultural psyche, had been brought into an industrial conflict with predictable consequences. Defeat, the machine, the systematic application of industrial capacity had proven to be the decisive factor. The significance of this shift was further illustrated by the reflections of Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor and survived the war. Later in life, he became a Christian evangelist and took the time to analyze and understand the nature of American power. Fuchida recognized that weapons like the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, epitomized American strength not simply through their individual qualities, but because they were the result of a systematic industrial approach to warfare. These weapons were tangible evidence of a society mobilized for total war, each one a product of countless factories, a testament to the efficiency of American logistics, and a reflection of an organized training system that prepared soldiers to utilize such equipment effectively. Today, in military museums across Japan, American weapons from the World War II era are preserved and displayed as historical artifacts, serving as stark reminders of the technological and industrial supremacy that contributed to the Allied victory. Among these exhibits, the BAR often holds a prominent place, symbolizing the role of industrialized firepower in the Pacific War. Japanese visitors, especially the younger generations unfamiliar with the brutal realities of early 20th century combat, study these weapons to better understand how their nation's militaristic past was decisively defeated by the principles of industrial democracy. The lessons are unmistakable and enduring. In the modern world, the sources of national strength have shifted away from the valor of individual soldiers or the romantic notions of warrior spirit. Instead, success on the battlefield and in national security now hinge on a country's industrial capacity, the ability to produce massive quantities of advanced weaponry efficiently and reliably. Victory is no longer rooted in the willingness to face death heroically, but in the capacity to manufacture the tools necessary for warfare. Systematic organization, logistical excellence, and technological innovation have become the true measures of military power. The legacy of the BAR, the automatic rifle, embodying this lesson, was learned in the crucible of combat, where Japanese soldiers, initially unprepared for the industrial dimension of modern warfare, paid the ultimate price in blood and suffering. This transformation from a militaristic empire driven by spiritual and warrior ideals to a peaceful, economically focused nation was fundamentally shaped by the lessons gleaned from facing American automatic weapons. The BAR did not merely serve as the conflict in the Pacific during the final stages of World War II was a brutal testament to the devastating power of modern industrial warfare. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushima, who commanded the Japanese 32nd Army stationed on the island of Okinawa, found himself facing an inevitable and tragic end as the tide of the war turned decisively against Japan. On June the 22nd, in the year of 1945, as defeat loomed large and surrender appeared unavoidable, he chose to end his life through ritual suicide, a customary act of honor among Japanese military leaders, alongside his chief of staff. His last directives to his troops carried a poignant acknowledgement of the hopelessness of further resistance, recognizing that their efforts against the American forces, who had amassed overwhelming superiority, were futile. Ushima's death symbolized the collapse of organized Japanese resistance in the Pacific theater, marking the final chapter of a fierce and desperate struggle. The American forces, who had succeeded in defeating Ushima and his troops, held enormous advantages that spanned every facet of military power. Their artillery was far more extensive and technologically advanced. Their air forces dominated the skies. Their naval gunfire could decimate enemy positions from afar. And, perhaps most emblematic of their industrial might, their automatic weapons, such as the Browning automatic rifle, embodied the Industrial Revolution's impact on warfare. Although the BAR was just one element within this broader spectrum of technological superiority, it became a powerful symbol of America's industrial and military dominance. This superiority was rooted in a vast and efficient wartime industrial capacity, producing weapons and equipment at a scale and speed that were unattainable for Japan. The scars left by bullet impacts on the entrances of caves scattered across Pacific islands still serve as somber monuments, silent witnesses to the clash of two fundamentally different military philosophies. Embedded within these scars is a story of how the automatics that tore through those caves did more than just influence individual battles. They signified a seismic shift in the very nature of warfare itself. The relentless fire of the American automatic rifles was not merely a symbol of victory, but also a demonstration of how modern industry had transformed combat. The cacophony of BAR fire echoing across the Pacific Islands was more than noise. It was the industrial age's declaration of supremacy over traditional combat, symbolizing a new era in military history. These weapons epitomize the shift from individual heroism and hand-to-hand combat to war as an industrial process where the outcomes were dictated by mass production, technological innovation, and industrial capacity. Japanese soldiers, often fighting in caves and underground hideouts, bore silent witness to the ruthless efficiency of this new military paradigm. Many perished from ricocheting rounds they never saw coming. Victims of a mechanized form of warfare that prioritized firepower and industrial strength over personal bravery. Their suffering was a stark testament to the brutal effectiveness of modern industrial democracy, a concept where the collective might of a nation's factories and technological prowess determined the course of conflict. The legacy of the Browning automatic rifle in the Pacific Theater was thus not merely one of victory, but also a profound transformation in how nations perceived and waged war. It redefined the very fabric of military power, illustrating that, in the age of industrialization, a nation's strength was measured less by its warriors' valor and more by its ability to produce and wield destructive technology. Every burst of BAR fire served as a stark lesson for Japanese soldiers, an education in the reality of modern war, often paid for with their lives. The weapon's relentless assault demonstrated beyond doubt that traditional notions of warfare based on individual courage and martial spirit could no longer prevail against the overwhelming firepower of industrialized armies. In this way, the Browning automatic rifle succeeded where treaties and diplomacy had often failed. It delivered a compelling and unequivocal message to Japan that aggression against an industrial democracy was not only morally inadvisable, but fundamentally impossible. The destructive power wielded through such advanced weapons made clear that the era of unrestrained military conquest was coming to an end. This sobering lesson, learned amid the blood-stained sands and caves of Pacific Islands, from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, played a crucial role in shaping Japan's post-war identity. The brutal experiences of those battles fostered a profound transformation, leading Japan to become a pacifist nation that nevertheless grew into one of America's strongest allies in Asia. The path to this change was paved by the first Marine automatic riflemen, those young soldiers who, by pulling their triggers, began to teach the terrible mathematics of modern warfare. The story of the bear in the Pacific, therefore, is ultimately a narrative about how industrial capacity can overpower warrior tradition, how the might of mass production and technological innovation can triumph over individual bravery and martial heroism. This transformation is vividly etched into the countless cave entrances across Pacific Islands, each scarred by the ricochets of bullets, a testament to the fierce confrontation between old-world martial values and the relentless force of industrialized weaponry. These marks in the darkness served as silent witnesses to a brutal truth, that victory in the capacity to manufacture and supply weapons, fundamentally shapes the outcome of conflicts. And nowhere was this lesson more vividly demonstrated than by the Browning automatic rifle. This formidable firearm exemplified how a weapon's sheer power and relentless firepower can decisively influence the course of warfare. Its introduction conveyed a stark and unambiguous message. In war, strength and volume of fire are often the decisive factors that can turn the tide of battle. The Browning did not merely serve as a tool for combat, it became a symbol of overwhelming force, illustrating the brutal truth that in warfare, dominance is achieved through the most lethal means available. Its impact was undeniable, leaving no doubt that in the language of war, where victory is often dictated by firepower, nothing speaks as forcefully as overwhelming, lethal force.